Hello, my name is Elizabeth Adams and I am a geography teacher at Putteridge High School. As part of our CPD last year, we all met in different professional learning groups and mine was based on metacognition. As I began researching this, it became really clear to me about the importance of making the learning process more explicit in my teaching. The clip that you're about to see is 2 strategies that I have used in this year to help that process in my teaching and for my students in their learning. I hope you enjoy them. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good morning. The professional development group that I have been working with is a group about metacognition. As you can see from this slide, metacognition is developing students' ability to develop their own learning strategies. Through our talks in our groups, through the research that we have been doing as a group, 2 things really struck me about whether my focus for what I wanted to achieve. The first was this: it's not about huge changes, but adapting what you already have. The second was this idea of being explicit about the learning involved. To help focus these thoughts, I began thinking, with my group as well, about revision and about extended writing and how I could improve what I was already doing in the classroom. So here's what I began to research. Revision, firstly. What I used to do. I set revision for homework, I collected it in, had a look at it, and then I would do a lesson on revising the key things that we were learning for that topic for the assessment. However, through my research, I began thinking, what were the students thinking during this process? And it suddenly occurred to me that perhaps they weren't thinking about revision and the techniques used as detailed as I was. So I began 3 stages. First, writing revision notes. I asked students for their homework to write their own revision notes. I made this explicit by asking students to record the titles of every lesson in that unit and adding 5 key points that they had learnt during that lesson from their exercise books. I then encouraged them in green pen to write something that they understood and in pink pen to write areas that they didn't understand. As I looked through this revision and their notes that they had compiled, I was then able to use that to inform the revision that we did in the lesson. The second stage was in that lesson. Instead of teaching lots of techniques and getting them to revise, I began to just change it slightly and get the students to think about the revision that they were doing. To do this, they started off with a test at the beginning of the lesson, just a quick 5 question test about the unit. Then I taught a technique and then they were tested again. And as you can see from these slides, activity 1 was development indicators, then they had a test and they recorded their answers. We went through this for 4 different activities, as you can see there, Pictionary, sorting. I deliberately did one as reading because a lot of my students told me that reading was an effective form of revision. And then to get them to think about the techniques that they used, I asked them to write what was the best score and why, what was the least or worst score and why. And then we used that to help them to focus on what their revision techniques could be. For Key Stage 4, I extended it a bit further by asking the students to think about the appropriate techniques for different types of revision. For example, key words, for understanding landforms, for case studies. And we were able to talk about how we could change our revision depending what we were revising. The second step was homework again. For Key Stage 3, they had to choose 3 out of 5 techniques and have a go at them. And for Key Stage 4, it was 5 out of 6 techniques for them to revise. And you can see some examples from the Year 7. Mind maps, quizzes, and an odd one out there. And I found that this really helped focus their revision and to get them thinking about what is appropriate revision. The second feature of my research was looking at extended writing. I was becoming concerned that although students could write really well in my small assessments in class, because we'd done lots of work on it, when they got to their year 10 or their mocks and their final exams, sometimes they came unstuck about how to do these long answer questions. In the past, what I did was bug, which is box the command word, underline the keywords, and glance back at the marks, and peel questions, point, explain, evidence, and link. All good stuff. But what I wanted to do was to make the thinking behind what we were doing a bit more explicit. So I began to look at the process used in metacognition of planning, monitoring, and evaluating. I handed out purple pens so that they saw that this was a difference and stood out in their work. And before we answered a long question, we planned our question in that purple pen. I particularly like question 2, as you can read there. Have I done a question like this before, and how did I do? Once they had planned the question, we then had a class discussion, as we would normally, looking at what we found out, what things we need to include in the answer. Then I asked the students to write their answers for 5 minutes. Then I stopped them. We got the purple pens back out, and we answered the monitoring questions. And the idea about these was for them to start working out, am I keeping to the question? Am I using keywords? Am I being place specific, etc., etc., to help them answer their long questions? Then at the end, sometimes I did this after I marked their work, sometimes I did this completely at the end of their writing, again in purple pen, getting them to think, how effective was I? Did this strategy work? And here we have some examples. Here's the planning stage. They bugged their question and now they're answering in purple pen how they were going to plan the question. Here, can you see she's written a few lines and then they've gone through the monitoring, and then in the green pen at the end, and then lastly her evaluation, which she wrote there. As you can see, she needed to speed up because obviously she only wrote 5 lines in 5 minutes. And I found this has really helped my students to really think through the processes that are involved in writing these long questions, so that when they come to one they find really difficult, they've got a strategy of what to do. As you can see, none of this was completely new. It was adding to the work that I'd already done. So finally, the 2 key points I'd like to stress. It wasn't about huge changes, but adapting what I've already had. And the key thing that I am taking with me is being explicit about the learning involved. It's been lovely to talk to you. Miss you all. Can't wait to see you. And thank you for listening. Goodbye.